Good morning, Bobcat family, and welcome to our second episode of Daily Dose of Torah. Hope everybody is having a wonderful vacation so far. Let's get into it. Today we're going to be looking at 6th grade Navi. And 6th grade, they start Sefer Shmuel, which is divided into two different books, Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet. In Shmuel Aleph, we hear the origin stories of the last of the Shoftim, the last of the judges that lead the Jewish people after Moshe and Yehoshua, and really lead us into the period of time of kings. Shmuel is the one who anoints the first king of Shaul, King Saul, and Shmuel's origin story is unbelievable. It teaches us so much. And the story begins like this. In Israel, there was a man named Elkanah. He lived in Ramah, and Ramah is to the north of Yerushalayim. And Elkanah had two wives. One wife's name was Penina, and the other wife's name was Chana. Penina has an easy time having children, and she's very happy with her life. Chana, on the other hand, has it a little bit more difficult. Chana doesn't have any children. She goes 10 years waiting for a child. Now, anybody that knows, this is one of the most difficult, painful things that a person could go through. And Chana is having trouble with Penina. There's really a difference of opinion what exactly Penina had in mind. But at least the Tanakh tells us that Penina would kind of mock or goad or tease Chana over the fact that she did not have any children. Some people say that maybe it was an effort to get Chana to Daven to Hashem. Whatever it was, Chana does go to Daven to Hashem. In those days, there was no Beit HaMikdash. It had yet to be built, but there was a Mishkan. And the Mishkan was situated in a place called Shiloh. So Chana goes to Shiloh to Daven. And the pasuk that talks about Chana's tefillah actually becomes one of the most important psukim, the most important verses for teaching us how we daven nowadays. Here the pasuk goes. It's from Shmuel Aleph, Perek Aleph, pasuk Yud Gimel. V'chana hi midaberet al liba, rak sfateha naot v'kola lo yishamea, v'yachshavea eli l'shikora. Chana would speak to her heart. Rak sfateha naot, just her lips would move. Kola lo yishama, but there was no sound that was made. Eli l'shikora. Now, Eli, who was the Kohen Gadol, who was in charge of the Mishkan in Shiloh at the time, Eli thought that this woman that was davening with such passion, such intensity in the Mishkan, that she was drunk. Something was wrong with her because nobody really would daven quite like that. And Chana had such a bitterness and such a difficult time over her situation that Eli couldn't fathom what exactly was going on with this woman. Now, it turns out that when Eli goes up to her, Chana explains that she's davening for a child, and eventually that child is born to her. That child's name is Shmuel. Chana dedicates this child to the service of Hashem, and he becomes Eli's apprentice. He sleeps in the Mishkan. Chana says, if you'll just help Hashem to grant me this one wish for a child, then I promise I'm going to give him over to the service of Hashem in the Mishkan. Her wish is granted, the child is born, and it's amazing because what we call Tefillat Chana, there's a whole section that comes a perek later in Perek Gimel. There's a whole section that we call the prayer of Chana, has nothing to do with this prayer of her wanting a child. It comes from her thanks over being granted that wish. I think it's an amazing thing that we assume that the Tefillah of Chana is the Tefillah that she's pouring out her heart, begging for something that she wants, but in actuality, Tefillat Chana is a prayer of thanks and praise to Hashem. Probably come to that later. But Chazal, our rabbis, learn three specific things from the prayer of Chana. And these are things that are almost basic when it comes to our tefillah, when it comes to our davening nowadays. But it wasn't so simple before Chana came along. Now, it is remarkable that the basics of our prayer, the basics of how we daven to Hashem, come from this episode, come from this woman who is begging Hashem for some sort of salvation. The Gemara tells us in Mesechet Brachot, Daf Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph, that the three things we learned from Chana's prayer from this particular pasuk are as follows. Midaberet al liba, speaking to our heart, kind of an internal speech. She is talking to herself. We say Mikan mitpalel shetzarich shechavein libo. We know that now in tefillah we have to have kavana. Kavana, in the most simple way, means the things that are coming out of my mouth, the things that I am saying in tefillah are actually the things that I'm thinking. I'm not distracted. I'm not somewhere else. I'm focused on the words. That when I say that Hashem should rebuild Yerushalayim in my Shemona Esrei, I really am thinking about the rebuilding of Yerushalayim. The second thing, besides kavana that we learn, this internal focus on what the tefillah is supposed to accomplish, the second thing that we learn, rak sfateh naot, Mikan lemitpalel sheichtoch b'sfatav. Here we know that when you are davening, even if you're not making a sound out of your tefillah, that your lips should be moving. There should be some sort of a physical representation of your prayer. That's why you'll see sometimes people are davening Shemona Esrei properly, so they'll be davening like this. Of course, there's the shuckle back and forth, but there's this. Right? You just see that I closed my eyes like this. I heard from a teacher of mine, Rabbi Dov Zinger, that we mistakenly think that intense kavana, intense focus in tefillah means that like you're almost somehow in pain like this. But he says really the response should be a smile. Intense kavana should come with a serenity and a smile in front of you. That's what kavana really should look like, not pain necessarily. The next thing that we learn is kola lo yishama. The third thing that we learn is that her voice wasn't heard. Mikan she'asur lagvia kolo b'tefillah. From here we know that you don't raise your voice too much. Tefillah is a private thing. Tefillah is something that's personal. We do it together with other people, and that's what gives it its power. But sometimes the word should be to us. It used to be when I was in yeshiva, there used to be a person that would say their Shemona Esrei, and it would be a little bit louder than you were supposed to hear. And there's that quiet in the room. And eventually I saw one of the rabbis went and said, I know that you have so much kavanah. I know that your tefillot are so important and impressive, but you have to remember of the other people davening and trying to have intention, trying to have kavanah at the same time. We learned that from Chana. You can't raise your voice more than normal, more than what is respectable to others when you're davening your tefillot. Now, these three things we learned from Chana's prayer at Shiloh. And I think it's wonderful that the Tanakh preserves the fact that Eli kind of thought that Chana was drunk. He was so shocked at the intensity of Chana's prayer. And what turned into a moment that perhaps Chana could have been embarrassed eventually becomes preserved as the way that we daven nowadays. We learned that all from Chana. Our rabbis preserved that for eternity. Now, I would sign off by telling us that hopefully when we daven properly and when we have as much kavanah, as much intention, and I'm not just talking about davening from a siddur, I'm talking about davening to find a parking spot, or I'm talking about davening to win your game. I'm talking about talking to Hashem in your heart whenever you can. You could do that all the time. It doesn't have to be in shul. It doesn't have to be in school. It doesn't have to be in the times they're set for Shacharit, Mincha, Marav. We can always be in conversation with Hashem. Whatever it is, I hope that we follow Chana's lesson of intensity, of focus, of speaking to ourselves, of having something going on really deep in our hearts when we daven to Hashem. And then I also hope that Hashem eventually, like Chana, answers all of your prayers, all of our prayers, all of Am Yisrael's prayers. Signing off, wishing you a wonderful, wonderful rest of the break. I'll see you tomorrow for episode number 3. Thank you so much for learning with me, Bobcat family. Have a wonderful day.